Every single day, someone is trying to change your mind. A brand that wants your money, a politician that wants your vote, a video that wants your time. The reason you clicked on this is because I persuaded you to click. The truth is, persuasion underscores much of our human experience. Today's guest, Karyn Suárez, is a communication coach and persuasion expert, and she trains leading executives and entrepreneurs in the art of persuasion. In this episode, we deconstruct the psychology behind persuasion, the subtle cues behind authority and trust, and how you can use them to persuade others. Here's my conversation with Karyn Suárez. I'd love for you to take us into what moment in your life when you realized that persuasion was a skill that ought to be learned.
Oh my gosh, persuasion? I think we learned that so quickly. I'd have to say maybe at the age of 3. When I was trying to persuade my mom to buy me an ice cream and, right before the dinner time. And usually, your parents are like, no, don't eat any sweets before the dinner. And then that's when the persuasion kicked off, just trying to convince my mother by being very cute, very sweet, and then telling her the benefits of having an ice cream before and promising her that I would eat my entire meal if she'd let me. So I think persuasion is something that it's innate in all human beings, and it's something that we all have, just to be able to have that ability to convince somebody of something that we may possibly want, but we think could benefit them as well. So persuasion is something that is a skill, and all of us have that ability. We just have to develop it and know how to develop it.
I mean, you have it developed to the bone, right? I was just thinking about this hypothetical. Let's say you were sitting in a cafe, just people watching. Would you be able to tell, or rather, I'm sure you would be able to tell where someone is convincing another, right? You'd be able to read other people's body language and the way that they're speaking. What would be the things that you would look for? Say you're just eavesdropping on someone's conversation on a business meeting. What would you be looking for?
I love this question. I love studying people. I think it's great because the nonverbal communication says so much more than what's actually coming out of our mouths. And if you learn to look at those micro gestures and see these people, you can find out so much information. And if there's a persuasion situation going on, it's interesting to see, for example, the persuader, the person who's maybe trying to sell to that person, is going to be a little bit more facing forward, being leaning in, trying to give a lot of good eye contact, trying to connect with that person. And you'll see if they're actually doing their job or if it's working by the way that the customer or the client that they're persuading is looking. If that person looks distracted, if they're doing micro gestures where even the most minimal, where they're touching their ear or maybe they scratch their face, it means that they feel uncomfortable in a situation. So they may feel not really or if the obvious, they look up, they look at their watch, there's all those gestures that are going to tell them that they might be in a hurry, right? They want to run out of there. But one of the key factors is looking at the position of their feet. Okay. You have to look at the person that you're persuading. If their feet are pointing to a window or to a door and not straightforward to the person speaking to them, persuading them, that means that they're looking for the quickest escape. Okay, so you always have to look at their body structure. Are they facing forward towards that person who's persuading them? Are they kind of turned to the side, trying to find an exit? So looking at their body position is a huge factor. And also, of course, their eye contact and any of those micro gestures where they might be looking like they're uncomfortable, right? So that's important to look at.
Listen, what do you do? All right, let's say someone unfortunately is in such a situation where the person they're trying to sell to is visibly uncomfortable and they want to leave. How do you salvage that situation?
As a persuader, you have to be so in tuned with these micro gestures of that client, right? You really have to kind of see what I'm telling you. Look at their body posture, all that. Once you get that clue, right? That subconscious or unconscious clue that they have, then you kind of have to just maybe drop trying to pitch them, trying to sell them, and actually ask them questions. Get to know that person. And really, really try and connect. Maybe not talk about the product or the service that you're trying to sell them on. Maybe just ask them questions about themselves. What are some of the things they're looking for, whatever the topic is, but switch it over to them And by giving them that attention and doing active listening, that's going to make that person a little bit more comfortable. If they don't want to answer your questions and they still look like they want to get out of there, then you just have to drop it. And you have to say, hey, let's schedule a coffee next week, and see if they're even interested in that. Mhm.
Yeah, I guess at some point you might have to cut your losses. Did
Yes.
did this ever happen to you? Because I'd imagine that you just walked through all the persuasion meetings that you've sort of gone through, right? I feel like did you ever have any failures, so to speak, while persuading people in your life?
Yeah, I think that's how we learn, Ishan, right? I mean, I would lie to you if I'd be like, oh no, I'm perfect. Of course, I'm the best persuader. No, of course I failed. I failed miserably in so many moments where I had to sell something. I think my first job was selling car insurance. Could you imagine over the phone, like cold calling? I mean, how horrible is that? I was like 16 years old and, it was like my very first job and we had to sell this car insurance and we had to read a script and everything. And one of the ways that I realized that I would actually be more successful was to get off of the script and start asking questions to the client, really getting to know them, asking them a little bit about themselves. And that's when I was more successful. But in the beginning, I don't think I sold anything for like 4 months. I almost got fired. So, I mean, it's not easy. But I think, by failing is how you learn. When I realized that by reading the script, I wasn't getting anywhere, then I said, well, let me just get off the script and kind of go my own way and feel it out. Right. And that's basically when I started learning to persuade a little bit better.
I think persuasion in some ways is more prevalent in our lives than we might imagine. For example, just with a partner, just as an example, the person that you're living with, there are some sort of micro persuasions that you go through on a daily basis. Could you just take us into the role of persuasion in our everyday lives?
Yeah. I mean, don't you? I don't know if, you have a significant other or whatever, but, overall, when you want your boyfriend or girlfriend to do something like wash the dishes or take out the garbage, it's a huge factor, right? And it depends a lot on how you say it, your tone of voice. Like if I'm going to ask my husband to take out the garbage and I use a tone of like, "Are you going to take out the garbage? Like, can you take it out now?" Right? It's probably not going to be as effective as in the persuasion factor. I mean, eventually he'll take it out, but maybe not at that moment. Or he might get upset with me and be like, oh, she's so annoying. Right. But if I say it the same sentence with a different kind of tone and I say, are you going to take out the garbage? Can you do it soon? Right. And a smile, maybe you touch the hair a little, right? Squeeze the arm, whatever it is, but with a nice, sweet tone and a smile, the same sentence is going to work way better than if I did it with a different tone. So I think we persuade on a daily basis, but we really need to know and watch our tone and, with our partners, with our significant others, whatever it may be. So we do persuade on a daily basis just for doing chores or to help us out with something, right?
As someone who teaches persuasion, you effectively have to persuade someone into believing that persuasion is important, right? You're trying to persuade people about the fact that your subject is important. How does one do that?
My gosh. Well, I start out by telling them the hook, right? And the hook is that I say, okay, I am going to teach you something that is like putting a weapon in your hands, right? You guys are going to have a dangerous gun in your hands. Now it's up to you to be able to use this information ethically and wisely. Right. So that's what I say. And it's kind of like I'm persuading them by giving them some kind of information that it's secret, that only they and myself are going to be the privileged ones to know about. And by giving them that sense of importance to the students, they're like, whoa, what is she going to teach us right now? She's going to give us a weapon. Like, I want to know what this is about. Right. So I'm already persuading them by creating that excitement, by creating that mystery on like, what am I going to teach them? I don't just say, okay, this is a class on persuasion. No, that's boring. We always have to add excitement, Ishan, right? In everything that we do, we have to make it mysterious. So that's what catches people from the beginning.
Can we dive into the art of persuasion? So I think, of course, having done my bit of research, Robert Cialdini, and I hope I'm saying that right, is one of the big names within this space. What was his idea about reciprocity, and could you break it down for the audience?
Reciprocity, that's one of my favorite ones, and I think you remember this one as well. And reciprocity, what Robert Cialdini, who is a psychologist and an educator who wrote various books on the art of persuasion, he basically stated that reciprocity, that if we give something to someone, but it has to have two factors. It has to be personalized and it also has to be unexpected. People feel automatically this instinct within them to kind of give back that favor, right? Or to say yes to something. So reciprocity is a big one. And I think the world doesn't do enough of that in general. I think not only for persuading, but I think we really have to give to others, right? And it has to come from the heart. It has to be sincere. We have to try and help other people in some way. And if we do that and we make it personalized and it's unexpected, where it doesn't seem like, you're trying to get something out of somebody, then people automatically will respond to that. So that's why I think reciprocity is one of the biggest factors. And I could tell you the little story, right, that I told in one of my classes about my mom. Do you want to hear that story?
Please, please. Yes, I think the audience will love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom, who is like a master at persuading and nonverbal communication, she taught me a lot. She always told me that it's so important to always keep a little candy or box of chocolates inside your purse or your bag or something, right, that you can give away. And generally, she uses this theory all the time because one of the examples is that she went to one of the banks in South Florida to open up an account. And she didn't really have an appointment, but she went there. She waited in a long line. And when she got to the person who had to assist her, he was there for about an hour. He helped her with everything. And at the end, she decided to open up her purse and pull out that little box of chocolates. And she gave it to him and said, "Thank you so much, sweetie, for helping me. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you today. You are a doll." Right. And so the bank teller was so surprised that she actually would give him a little tiny gift. And it's not about the gift, right? It's about the act of giving that gift and how she personalized it and told him how she appreciated his time. All of that made him feel very special. So he felt that moral obligation that Cialdini says that psychologically works, that the next time that my mom went into the bank, like a month later, she had to do something else. There was a long line again, and she was waiting in the line. And that same bank teller saw her from a distance. And he said, "Hey, Vanessa, come this way." And she skipped the entire line, looking at all her friends as she walked by, feeling so important. And she was attended right away by the bank teller. Okay. Why? Not because of anything else, but of course, because that guy felt that moral obligation of returning that favor, of being nice to her because she gave him a box of chocolates, personalized and unexpected. So it works. And that's what we have to do in persuasion. If we want to persuade people, we should always give something. For a business, for an online company, companies do it all the time. They give you a small gift. They'll say, "Download our ebook for free. We'll be able to give you, an extra 2 for 1 or, whatever it is." And then you'll notice that that client or that customer generally will be grateful and they will come back and purchase again at your company and your business.
I think on a similar level, there are platforms for creators. Patreon, I'm sure you might have heard of it, where the whole premise is if you feel like giving back to this creator who has given so much to you for free online, you can, and I think on some similar level, it operates on the same basis. See, I guess in the bank teller example, it was unexpected, right? Your mom, out of the generosity of her heart, decided to give this to the teller. Let's say you're in a diplomatic meeting and you're a diplomat. In that situation, the other person, the diplomat from the other country, expects to be sold on some level, right? Or let's say you're trying to make a sale. The person that you're trying to sell to expects to be sold. And so, with that expectation in their mind, how do you breach it? Because in that scenario, if you say, try and give a piece
A
of
box of
chocolate or so on, yeah, it might appear disingenuous. So how do you navigate that space where the other person on some level knows it's coming?
I mean, I don't know if people, even if people know it's coming because, everybody kind of, they'll study these things and they're very wise on probably Cialdini's factors and everything. But it has to become very natural. It has to be kind of a natural exchange. And I'm not saying to give a box of chocolates to a diplomat, but there could be on some level something where you connect with the diplomat because reciprocity is not the only factor. So if you can't use reciprocity in that moment, you can build a connection with that person and say, "Hey, whatever you kind of build that connection, you can maybe offer to do something for that person, whether it's, hey, let's go for a coffee, or you like tickets to, soccer, right? Right now it's the World Cup. Well, you could say, hey, well, you know what? I'm going to see the World Cup. I might be able to see if I can get you a discount on some tickets next time I go. Something like that. Something very where it could match into a connection, some kind of affinity that that person has, but not in such an obvious way. It has to be very smooth. And so the chocolates idea is a very okay, that's like my mom, right? She's just like very, very outgoing like that. But with diplomats, I think it's something that you can offer, whether it's business wise, or you can maybe give a discount, not a discount, but maybe something that's gonna appeal to them, that you can figure out a way to give it to them either free or at a discount.
Okay, what about authority? I think that's one of Cialdini's pillars that I think we should dive into. What does he speak about when he talks about authority and persuasion?
Okay, so authority is also a big one. Basically, the theory of authority is credibility. And that goes back to when we talk about the ancient Aristotle, right? Aristotle also said that ethos is the same thing as having authority will give you credibility. So if you have, the more degrees you have, the more you study, the more knowledge, the more titles, all of those things that you have experience, it's going to automatically make you more convincing to somebody. Would you go, Ishan, to a dentist who says, hey, you know what? I just graduated yesterday. I'm so excited. You're my very first customer. Oh my gosh. And, I almost failed my exam, but, by 2 points, I passed. And he's got the drill in his hand.
Never,
Would
and
you
I
be
actually have my
afraid?
dentist appointment 2 hours
Oh
from
my
now. So yeah, that's quite
You better look at
fun.
his degrees on the wall. You better ask him before you do anything. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. Would you trust somebody to be able to, work on your teeth when they just graduated? They're kind of new. I just finished my internship. You're like, oh God. So it's really important to be able to have that credibility and authority. And those people are the ones that are most convincing. I mean, you're convinced if you're already saying you're a CEO of a company. I mean, look at you, Ishan. You're very convincing already. You have all the background, right? You did a TED talk. You wrote a book. I mean, you have such amazing experience in your CV and your resume. So right away, that makes you an authoritative figure. So when people interview you, they're going to want to know information about you because you have that experience. So, and it kind of, the downside is, for young people, you think, well, all right, well, how am I ever going to be credible if I'm just starting out in the business world, or I'm starting out, I'm 21. I mean, I just graduated. What am I going to do? Well, it will take a little bit of time. It will take a little bit of time to be able to build up your resume. Like anybody else, we have to work and do many things to get that credibility. So I started in my life later on, being interviewed on television and things when I wanted to be interviewed at 21. I was like, oh, why am I not on TV? Why are they not? Because I didn't have the experience and the knowledge that I have now. So it does take time, and you can't expect to have that authority and credibility at the age of 21 graduating right away. So build up your resume, do lots of things, and that automatically will give you that credibility later.
Is charisma and persuasiveness the same thing?
Charisma and persuasiveness, I think they kind of go hand in hand, because a charismatic person is always going to persuade a little bit more than somebody perhaps that might be more introverted, right? There's a story that I tell as well about two salesmen. Okay. And these two salesmen were from the 1950s. We have, for example, Daniel, who is completely extroverted. And then we have Miguel on the other side, who is a little bit more of an introverted salesperson. And both of these in the 1950s, which were out there selling, what were they? They were vacuum cleaners. They were selling vacuum cleaners in the 1950s. Now, let me ask you a question, Ishan. Who do you think was their main client in the 1950s, in those days when they would go door to door?
I guess the housewife who's living at home, right?
Correct. Yes, the housewife. Okay. So the housewife. All right. So we have Miguel. And Miguel's the shy one, but he's very, very technical. So he knows everything about the vacuum cleaner. He knows how to take it apart, put it together. He knows how all the pieces are working. He's very engineer focused and everything else. But his communication skills and his charisma is maybe like a 5 out of 10. Okay. But he does have a lot of knowledge of the product. So he goes knocking on the door to the first woman's house, and he knocks on the door and he goes there, and the woman opens the door and she's like, hello. And he's like, hi, my name is Miguel, and I have this vacuum cleaner, and I really think it's going to interest you because it works really good. And the woman's like, I'm sorry, but my husband's not home and I can't attend to anybody at the moment. Right. So he gets turned down all the time because just his approach was not charismatic. Just from the moment that he, knocked on the door, it was just kind of shy. He wasn't giving eye contact, wasn't showing any kind of charisma in his tone. So then we have Daniel. And Daniel, who is very extroverted and he loves selling, it's his passion, it's what he wants to do. And he gets actually like turned on just by making a sale. He's like, I'm so excited, right? That's like his goal. So he's a very charismatic leader. Out of 10, he's probably a 9.95 in charisma. So he knocks on the woman's door, same woman or different woman, and the lady opens the door and he's like, before you say no, I have to show you something that will completely change your life. And the woman's like a little bit pulled back and like, okay, what is this guy going to do? She's a little bit nervous, right? And he's like, can you just give me 5 minutes of your time? And the woman's like, kind of nervous, but a little bit excited to know what he's talking about. So she lets him into her house. And right away, Daniel, he says to her, can you please get me 2 glasses of wine? Or two wine glasses. And the woman's like, well, I'm sorry, but I can't give you any wine. I can't serve you any liquor. He's like, no, 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 just the glass. And she's like curious right now. So he awokened her curiosity. So she goes to the kitchen, comes back, gets a glass of wine, right? And he says, now stand back. And she's like, actually fearful at the moment. And what Daniel does is he gets the glass. Let me see if I have a glass here. No, I don't, but I'm going to pretend this is a glass. So he gets the glass in his hand and he drops it on the floor. And all of a sudden, shattered glass goes flying all over her living room floor. And she's like, oh my God. And he's, don't worry. I am going to show you. And I promised you how this was going to change your life. And so he pulls out the vacuum cleaner. He starts vacuuming. He starts lifting up. He's like, look at it. Even picks up the tiny little shards of glass that it's so difficult to get, even in the smallest crevices in the corners of your house, under the couch, picks everything up within 30 seconds. Right. And what do you think? Who do you think sold more, Daniel, or do you think Miguel sold?
Daniel by the thousands, I'm assuming.
By 1,000. Of course. Because why? Because of Daniel's charisma. And charisma is based on your energy. It's based on your humor. It's based on how extroverted you are and how you connect with that client. And so that's what happened with Daniel. Not only did he sell that day 1 vacuum to that woman, but he actually sold 4 vacuums because she ordered one for her grandmother, for her mother-in-law, for her sister, and for her neighbor, who she also thought needed one. So she ended up selling 4. And that is the whole situation with charisma. If you are a charismatic leader, if you can actually show your energy to the client, that energy is contagious.
I think on a subliminal level, this happens even with speakers. Here's what I mean. Like if you're in the audience and the person walks onto the stage, I think in those first few seconds, you know whether you want to sit up and listen or just by the way they carry themselves. If they're sort of shrunk down uh, and if the first words they say are meek, then you know that, okay, this person doesn't have it. But if someone walks with, their chest broad and so on, I think that is non-verbal communication, if I've got the terminology right.
Correct. And what you just talked about is authority too, because the thing is that you can have, let me go back to authority. You can have a lot of authority. You can have 3 PhDs, you can have, 5 master's degrees. You can do all these things and have 25 years of experience on your belt. But if you go up on stage and you go there, and yes, you're an authoritative figure, but you cannot communicate well. Your nonverbal communication shows that you have, lack of confidence, right? Your shoulders are down, you're looking down, you're talking with a soft voice. Yes, technically on paper you're credible, but you still may not convince the audience just because of your degrees. So it has to be a combination of having that authority, right? Having that experience, but also really being able to communicate your experience, whether verbally as well as non-verbally. Giving that confidence, shoulders back, eye contact, the voice, which is your most powerful tool that you have. All of those things in combination makes you a powerhouse.
Even the speed with which you speak, I'd assume. I know people who speak really fast because they want to get the point out, and that just betrays their objective, as opposed to someone who's confident in being calm and crucially being confident in silence. I can tell you something that I've learned at least through these podcast episodes. The ability to stay quiet and to think is so nervous, so nervous, especially for the person who's conducting the interview. Right, you don't want any pauses in the recording, but to be able to be comfortable in silence, I think that's very important. So here's where I am just so baffled. This is so obviously something that people should be taught, and I'm happy to hear that it is something that can be taught. That's why you're doing this work. How does one do that? How do you teach someone these skills? Let's say you are the dean of a highly technical university, okay, let's say here in India. How do you teach these exceptionally technically proficient people the art of persuasion?
Wow. Okay. That is a challenge in itself. It's almost like saying, how do I solve world hunger?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it is so hard. And I'm going to tell you, Ishan, this is what just happened to me. What you're asking this question. I just came back from Munich, Germany, where I was coaching executives, actually telecom engineers, okay? Telecommunication engineers for Ericsson, the large company, the mobile network service of the antennas and everything that provide your cell phones to be able to work is through Ericsson. And so I went there and I had that same job. My goal was to teach 16 male engineers how to actually be charismatic. And okay, now put in the factors here. They're German. My gosh, number one already, German. Now that, what does that mean? Germans are very serious, right? Charisma level, I don't know. They're not really born with like a very high skilled charisma level to begin with. So German. Engineers, add the engineer on top of being German. So that was like, holy cow, if I could do this, I can conquer the world. I could solve world hunger. I could solve the environmental issues. So basically, I did it. I couldn't believe it. What you do is you really teach them certain skills. And now I can't tell you all my secrets, okay? Because then, because I charge for that. So,
Good, good, good.
but
If
what
if
I
anyone
can
wants
tell
more, they
you
better pay you.
Yes, 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 yes. So basically, it has a lot to do with your vocal variety, right? And like you said, those pauses and strategically putting your pauses and the way you communicate, the way you use your voice and the energy that you put out. I mean, if you're not going to put any energy in the room, people are going to feel it. They're going to just be like, oh, ugh. Why do I even want to listen? So a lot of it, and you were talking about your voice, you were talking about people want to talk really fast or, they're afraid of pauses. You have to pause strategically because that makes you so much more interesting. And you also should be able to vary your voice, like whether you're talking really fast, but then you slow it down at a very crucial moment, right? How loud you talk and then going down to a little whisper. Right? All of those things is a great technique to be able to add a little bit more, making your speeches so much more dynamic, the way you communicate to others in a setting, because it's really hard to talk about technical things and make it interesting. So I also told them, now another thing is like, hey, I'm not an engineer by far, right? So none of this stuff, all this stuff that you're telling me about wires and electrician and things, and I don't even understand it, right? It's like XP23 goes into the blue wire. Oh my God, I wanted to die. So I said, why don't you explain it to me as if I were a 12-year-old? Use metaphors, right? Use examples that would be in the real world that I would be able to relate to. Right? Maybe say like, we are the Amazon of the tech world, or whatever it is, whatever it is, use some kind of metaphor that when you're explaining something technical, you can also dumb it down in a way and then make it a real life example about something that the audience can relate to. And that will make it so much easier to understand, and people will be able to keep the focus. Right. And the last thing I taught them was the body language. Most of them were communicating all these things with their hands crossed, like this. And I was like, use your hands. If you're going to talk about 5 points that are important, you use your hands. 5 points. Point number one is this. Point number two, right? So that way the audience also follows what you're saying. So there's a lot of these tricks that I taught them and that I teach, and it seems to be very effective.
What about adults versus children? And I asked that by saying, are adults more persuadable? As in, can you persuade adults in a more easy fashion compared to persuading a child? And then we'll talk about them learning persuasion
Can
themselves.
you persuade adults more than persuading children?
Yeah, let's say like you need to get a task done. Would it be easier to persuade an adult to do it versus a child?
I think children are so much easier. Children are just based on rewards and punishments, right? It's like, okay, if you make your bed in the morning, you will have like a candy later on, right? Or I will let you play the PlayStation for an extra hour. So, that immediately you'll see a child will run upstairs and like make the bed in like 3.5 seconds. Okay. It's that simple. Or you could do the opposite. You could do like negative reinforcement. I like to do positive reinforcement with kids to persuade them, right? To kind of motivate them in that sense. I feel like a motivational factor will always be positive reinforcement than negative, okay, punishment. Where you're like, okay, if you don't make your bed, you're not going to have PlayStation, right? As opposed to saying, if you make your bed, I'm going to give you an extra half an hour or an hour today in PlayStation, right? They're going to do it so much faster and with a better preposition than if you give it to them negatively. So I think, and I think adults, if you're talking about adults, I think we're all children, Ishan. We're still kids, right? No matter how old we are, and I'm older than you, I am still a little girl at heart. Oh my God, I'd put me on a swing and I'll swing up high, I mean, so I think it's still from childhood to adulthood, we're still convinced and persuaded in very similar ways, very similar ways. And I think that we're easily persuaded through positive reinforcement in both.
What about the act of persuasion itself? Do you think children will take to it a lot more easily than, say, adults? Like if you were teaching the art of persuasion to a group of adults and children, who do you think would be more receptive?
Okay, children, but like what ages? Are we talking about college? Are we talking about high school? Are we talking about
No, no,
little
not
kids?
college. I'm talking about, let's say, an eighth grader.
An eighth grader. If we're teaching persuasion, then for the eighth grader, the way they have to see it is it has to be 100% practical. Like it has to be fun, right? But again, I don't see the difference even between kids and adults. Even adults, Ishan, in my classes and when I coach, outside of the university, I coach for these companies like Ericsson. People just want to have fun. They do at any age, even more as adults, right? So when I teach persuasion, I break them up into teams. What I do, this is a project that I do, and it could sound very infantile, and you can use it for eighth graders and you could use it for adults, and they will equally love it. I bring a bag filled with all kinds of things from my house, like, I don't know, random toys from my kids, right? I have like this, like, I don't even know. It's like this squishy, like one of those squishy things that people love. They say like, it's satisfying or whatever. So I'll bring like a squishy. I'll bring this one thing that I used to keep on my desk. I love it. I don't know if I have it here. No, it's somewhere. It would take a little while to get. But it says the word no on it. Okay, so when you press it, it just goes no, 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 no. And I bought it because I do have kids. And I was so sick and tired of saying no to my kids all the time that I just bought the button. And now when they ask me things, I just press it. So I don't have to say no. It just says it for me. But anyway, okay. So I bring this whole bag filled with things. And there could be things like maybe just me, but look, a lipstick, right? Put them all in the bag. Break up these adults that are master students from MBAs from around the world. And I break them into teams and I say, pick out of this bag, but you can't see what you're picking because it's a surprise. So they reach into the bag and they pull out, whatever it is. And now I say, now hide it from the rest of the people because your team's job is to persuade the rest of the audience here today to purchase your product. Right. So they have to come up with a whole scenario using ethos, pathos, and logos, like, credibility, all kinds of stuff. They have to sell it. They basically, like a Shark Tank, right? So they have to sell it to the audience. And it's a lot of fun and they get a kick out of it. Their creativity goes wild, because they might have to sell, I don't know, kind of like in The Wolf of Wall Street, sell a pen. How are they going to do that? And it's just mundane products. So, and if I were to do that for eighth graders, I think they would have the same amount of fun. So, really, in the end, Ishan, adults and children, when they're learning, the most important factor of learning is to just have fun. And that's how they learn even better.
That's beautiful. It's so simplistically beautiful. Not to dim it down, but I think there's really something beautiful to that. Let's say you are an aspiring leader, and we're talking on a grand scale now. From children, now we're going zooming out a bit. How do you convince the masses to believe in your idea? And I guess I know this can go both ways. Let's just take an inspiring example. MLK, for example, Martin Luther King.
Uh-huh.
What were some of those levers that he pulled on to inspire people to join his movement?
Okay. Well, I think one of the key factors, like if you say MLK, Martin Luther King, and some of those aspiring like speakers, is that they really relate and resonate with the audience. They relate to them. They use examples that people are suffering or people are understanding. Everything that you basically stop making it about you, right? Don't make it about you, make it about them. The most important people in the room there is not yourself as a leader. It's actually the people who are listening to your audience. And once you get that concept in your mind that it really isn't about you, it's about them, then everything else changes. Right. And that's how you win a public. That's how you win an audience. That's how you could persuade anyone. It's not about you making the sale and you wanting to sell. It's about what benefit is this going to bring them? How can I relate to them? How can I solve problems for them? And then that's when you win the confidence of people as well, because you want to be a leader that people trust and that people really understand and resonate with.
See, I see persuasion as a neutral tool. And I think it's incumbent on the person using that tool to use it ethically and use it to, or rather to not use it unethically, if that makes sense. How can you reach a stage where you can consciously point out and say, okay, this person is trying to persuade me to do something and I don't want to do it? How do you develop that muscle, that instinct?
Okay. Well, I think it's individualistic for each person, right? If somebody's trying to sell me on buying like some wooden clogs, right, some wooden shoes that I would never wear, then I'm going to be like, well, I don't really need this. I don't really want this for many reasons. No matter how much they connect with me or how much they tell me that I need it, if I don't need it, I don't need it. So, there's certain things that we may never be convinced with, right? Or like maybe getting a surgery or something. I don't know. Who knows? Unless you really need the surgery. But if you don't need it, it's aesthetic and it's something you don't need, you're like, oh no, right? So I think it's instinctual, in a sense to if the persuader hasn't really gotten to your psychological need, then you're easily gonna say no. So
Okay, so let's say I'm looking at my desk. Let's say I wanted to sell you this, a charger, right? Just for the people who are just listening to this, it's charger, it's a phone and a power brick. If I were to do this, what would be the things I start with?
you would start with the number one thing, the problem that everybody has, right? And what's that problem, Ishan?
Their phones keep dying.
Yes, right? Even after like how old is your phone? Do you have an iPhone?
Yeah, I have an iPhone, reasonably new. It's an iPhone 16.
Okay. Yeah, because like after 2, 3 years, like then you start having battery problems, right? And everybody everywhere is always looking for chargers wherever they go. They're like, "Oh, do you have a charger?" I mean, I know that's me. I go out and I'm like, "Oh, I forgot my charger," right? So you start with the problem. You start with a problem that's very, very common that most people have, and that is that their phone dies very quickly, and that you're sometimes, out and about and you forget your charger,
So
right?
something like, I'm guessing, don't you hate it when you're traveling and your phone just keeps dying? Like, isn't that like, and you sort of try to evoke that feeling and then you swoop in and you say, lo and behold, I have the solution.
But I would go a little bit deeper than that. Don't just start with that. Then go into a little bit of storytelling. Use yourself as an example then. Be like, for example, like the other day, I was, going to the grocery store and it was like a long drive. And then when I got to the grocery store, I realized I had 10% battery and my credit cards are on my phone. So I was like, oh my God, I better hurry up and grocery shop because if not, I'm not going to be able to pay for the groceries with very little battery. Right. So what do? I had no charger. Right. Has that ever happened to you? Well, yeah, I had a similar problem the other day. I was at this restaurant and I didn't have my charger with me. And oh my God, I was on a video call and it was taking up all my battery. That be like, yeah, I could totally relate. And that's why you can't leave the house without a charger. And I have your solution. Here's my charger. So you have to storytell a little bit and use yourself. Like, why is this important to you as well? Right? How could you be an example? Because you're going to give them that feeling of like trust by saying that you're also, not only are you selling it, but you're also a user. You also share the same problem. And that's why. Okay.
I think storytelling is so interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when I, as the person trying to persuade you, tell you a story, you instinctively try and think of a similar story that has happened to you. And thus that gets you to connect with me more. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah. You start thinking about, oh my gosh, I could totally relate. It's called, it's the relatability that goes on there, right? It's like, oh my gosh, yeah. Even if that didn't happen to me, but see that is a story that's happened to at least somebody somewhere in the world, right? Everybody has had that similar story. So, but there might be a time where you're selling something that maybe that story they haven't suffered it, but they're interested still to understand your story and that you're opening up to them to tell them about you and what happened to you and your problem and how you came up with the solution, right? So. Mhm.
But I think there's so much that we can talk about. I think we might have to do another episode to just dive
I
into
know,
this.
just on
Yeah.
storytelling itself.
Just yeah. I'm gonna ask you two more questions. FOMO is something that you had mentioned in the class that I had attended of yours as a very powerful storytelling technique. How does one use FOMO to persuade someone?
Okay, so FOMO, fear of missing out. Yes, that would be what we call also scarcity when you're looking at the technical term, right? Scarcity is one of the most powerful one because we always, as humans, we don't want to miss out on anything. We want to know it all. We want to have it all. And the most persuasive way is to tell somebody, you know what? I have this charger that I'm selling. Oh, but Ishan, I'm sorry. I can't sell it to you. I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't. But anyway, but I'll see if I can get you one maybe next year. Then I'll be like, why can't you sell it to me? No way. Like, why? Why, Ishan? I want that charger. Like, right? So even if you start with that, people are like, it's like taking candy away from a child, right? You show them the candy and you're like, here, you want this? Here, I'm going to give it to you. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't give it to you now. And then the kid's going to want it more. Maybe the kid didn't even want the candy before, but now they want it, right? So that's the whole thing with fear of missing out is just that when we are told something that we can't have, we become spoiled brats and we want it more. When we're told that there's a limited time, like in companies do this all the time and we get duped all the time because of our fear of missing out. Like I had said, in Amazon, you go on there and you're looking at a product that you're unsure about buying. And if it says only 3 items left, you know that maybe you weren't going to buy that day. But when you see the 3 items left, only 3 or only 1 item left, you're going to probably most likely buy it by the end of the day because you're afraid that tomorrow you open up your computer and that product is gone. Okay. Are you a culprit of that? Yes. Ishan, shake your head if you're, yes. See, Amazon, flights, everything, only 3 seats left, right? I mean, that's what they do. And it's the oldest trick in the book. And we fall for it every time. And that shows us the power of the fear of missing out.
This is the closing question I have on every podcast, all right? Let's say hypothetically that you had access to billboards across the world for just one day. What message would you put up there?
Billboard. Okay. I would say, well, first of all, my dream, Ishan, is that after this podcast, that I will be on a huge billboard in India
Let's go.
on the expressway,
Yeah.
with this, okay, with my face and like this saying, okay, this is going to be my dream. Are you going to make it happen?
I'll do my best. I'll try my best. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It would say the quality of your life depends on the quality of your communication. Call me.
Beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. That's such a beautiful place to end. I thank you so much, Karyn, for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
This is
And
so
don't
nice.
forget about my billboard, okay? I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I'll get to work right after this call. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, I have three small requests to ask you. If you enjoy listening to the episode, then please subscribe. Second, please share this with someone who you think will find it valuable. You see, a lot of effort and time goes into creating these podcasts. And so by sharing it, you'll help me reach new audiences, and that'll help keep the show alive. Third, please tell me your thoughts. You can reach out to me on social media, on email, and so on, and tell me what you enjoyed, what you didn't like, and new guests and episodes that you'd like to have discussed on the podcast. Again, thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.